Stickman opened his eyes beneath a sky painted with raw clouds and the distant growl of thunder. The world was new, unshaped, and hungry. With nothing but a crude spear and his circular head full of curiosity, he stepped into the Stone Age forest, where shadows of mammoths and saber-toothed cats waited to test his courage. He was no hero, just a tangle of lines and one circle, but his determination was thicker than stone. The trees whispered stories of survival, and Stickman learned quickly that berries and roots weren't always friendly. Some bit back. Some made him dance uncontrollably by the fire, discovering what we now call food poisoning. Hunting wasn't glamorous either. The spear felt heavier than his whole body, and every throw seemed destined to miss. Yet through trial, bruises, and lucky accidents, Stickman earned his place as a hunter. He wasn't just surviving, he was shaping the first chapter of human grit, with stick-shaped footprints pressed into soft mud. The seasons turned, and so did Stickman's role. Fire became his companion, not his enemy. He painted stick figures on cave walls. Self-portraits, of course. Archaeologists would one day find them and argue whether they were art or just a doodle gone wrong. Either way, Stickman became eternal on stone. But time is restless, and so was history. One blink later, Stickman found himself armored in bronze, standing in the roaring heart of the Roman Empire. The Colosseum loomed like a hungry mouth, and crowds cheered for blood. Stickman tightened his helmet, which was far too big for his head, and marched forward. Life as a Roman soldier wasn't all glory and grapes. Marching for days with sandals that rubbed his stick feet raw, Stickman learned discipline the hard way. Legion formations were neat squares, but he always ended up slightly diagonal, driving commanders mad. Yet, in the chaos of battle, he held the line. Rome was a machine, powered by sweat and ambition. Stickman witnessed roads stretching like veins across Europe, aqueducts carrying life itself, and philosophy argued under marble arches. Sometimes he even pretended to understand Latin, nodding wisely at words that sounded suspiciously like spaghetti. He belonged, even in simplicity. But time is restless, and so was history. One blink later, Stickman found himself armored in bronze, standing in the roaring heart of the Roman Empire. The Colosseum loomed like a hungry mouth, and crowds cheered for blood. Stickman tightened his helmet, which was far too big for his head, and marched forward. Life as a Roman soldier wasn't all glory and grapes. Marching for days with sandals that rubbed his stick feet raw, Stickman learned discipline the hard way. Legion formations were neat squares, but he always ended up slightly diagonal, driving commanders mad. Yet, in the chaos of battle, he held the line. Rome was a machine, powered by sweat and ambition. Stickman witnessed roads stretching like veins across Europe, aqueducts carrying life itself, and philosophy argued under marble arches. Sometimes he even pretended to understand Latin, nodding wisely at words that sounded suspiciously like spaghetti. He belonged, even in simplicity. But time is restless, and so was history. Medieval nights were painted with firelight. Stickman watched cathedrals rise like frozen prayers against the sky. He scribbled stick versions of stained glass windows, hoping future monks wouldn't notice. He laughed at jesters, feared black-cloaked inquisitors, and wondered if his story would ever outlive the ringing of church bells. But history never stays still. With the creak of sails and the smell of salt, Stickman found himself on the deck of an age of exploration ship. Compass in one hand, seasickness in the other, he sailed toward unknown continents where maps still carried monsters in their margins. Storms slammed the deck, but Stickman held on, learning that exploration wasn't for the faint of line. He saw new lands rise from mist, met cultures that redefined the world, and realized that discovery was often just another word for chaos. Still, his round head faced every sunrise with awe. Centuries spun like a wheel, and soon Stickman stood amid roaring cannons and the smoke of revolutions. The Enlightenment whispered about reason and liberty, while muskets shouted much louder. Stickman tried wearing powdered wigs but looked ridiculous, so he stuck with his circle head and carried on. He scribbled notes alongside inventors, testing steam engines with wide-eyed wonder. The world was heating up with ideas, factories, revolutions, and philosophies crackling like lightning. Stickman felt history sprinting faster, leaving behind old castles and riding steel locomotives instead. He ran, of course, stick legs flailing after progress. And then the world truly exploded with noise. Stickman awoke in the trenches of the 20th century, mud clinging to every invisible muscle. War had grown teeth of metal, tanks rumbling like monsters, skies raining fire. For the first time, his stick simplicity seemed almost fragile. Yet, Stickman endured. He carried letters, shared rations, and laughed with soldiers whose stories were written in the dirt. Between chaos, he dreamed of peace, of jazz spilling from radios, of a future where dancing felt louder than gunfire. His thin frame carried the weight of an entire century. Peace finally cracked through, and Stickman embraced a new rhythm. The mid-century world was neon bright and buzzing with invention. He tried rock and roll, twisting his stick limbs into shapes that looked nothing like Elvis, but everything like fun. He watched rockets leap toward the stars, and he dreamed bigger. Televisions lit up homes, computers blinked into existence, and Stickman, once just a cave doodle, was now part of a digital awakening. He clicked his first mouse with trembling curiosity, discovering pixelated worlds where he could finally meet stick versions of himself on screens everywhere. But as decades raced on, the digital tide turned wild. Suddenly, Stickman was hunched in a hoodie, surrounded by glowing code and buzzing servers. He was no knight anymore, no soldier, no hunter. He was a hacker. The battlefield was cyberspace, and his sword was a keyboard. Hacking wasn't about destruction. It was about curiosity, about opening locked doors that never needed walls. Stickman cracked codes, dodged firewalls, and sometimes accidentally ordered 40 pizzas online. He laughed at his own glitches, but behind the humor was the spirit of every era before him: survival, adaptation, creation. The digital world was vast, infinite like the skies his ancestors once stared into. Stickman surfed it all, from memes to megabytes, carrying his lineage of lines and circles into realms where history wasn't written in stone, but in servers. And yet, beneath every glowing screen, Stickman remembered the forest. He remembered spears and firelight, marching legions, clanging armor, and dusty maps. Every age was still alive in him, woven into the simplicity of his shape. He was history itself, stripped to its most essential form. As centuries blurred, Stickman's journey revealed something larger. Progress isn't about crowns or circuits, it's about resilience. He was proof that even the simplest shapes could stand the test of time, outlasting kingdoms, emperors, and algorithms. The world may forget the names of generals or kings, but the doodle never dies. Stickman lives in the margins of notebooks, in animations, in cave walls, and code. He belongs everywhere because he asks for nothing but a little imagination to breathe life into his lines. And so, in this digital dawn, Stickman keeps evolving. Today, a hacker, tomorrow, maybe an astronaut, or even a time traveler looping back to those Stone Age fires. Wherever history flows, he'll be there. Circle head, thin limbs, eternal grin, reminding us that sometimes the simplest stories are the strongest. Stickman doesn't just survive history. He dances through it, slips on its banana peels, and laughs at its contradictions. He is our eternal doodle, our echo of every age. The journey never ends. It only redraws itself one stick at a time. And perhaps that's the secret. While kings fall and empires fade, Stickman survives because he never pretends to be more than he is. Just a circle, a few lines, and endless possibility. In that honesty, he becomes indestructible, an immortal sketch scribbled across the canvas of time. The future will redraw him in ways we can't predict. Holograms, VR adventures, or quantum stick figures dancing inside particles. Yet no matter how advanced, he'll always carry the memory of stone spears, Roman sandals, medieval jousts, and glowing screens. History lives inside his thin frame. So when you watch him next, hunting mammoths, clanking in armor, or hacking the digital night, remember this: Stickman isn't just a doodle. He's all of us, stumbling, laughing, fighting, and evolving through the centuries. A living timeline, proof that even the simplest mark can outlast eternity.